And I'm live? Do we have
Happening.
game? We have game. Okay, cool. Hello.
Brilliant.
Hi. It's Monday.
Hello all.
We're streaming. We're
That
live.
is.
It's been a day. Don't worry about it. We took last week off, but we're back. Oh, I don't want to continue. Yuck. Is this going to be spoilers? Don't look. Right at the end. New game. So today, we're not playing web fishing for once. We're playing Mirror's Edge. Maybe. We'll see. Oh, the voice is gonna send me. But yeah, as you can probably guess by the title, today we're going to talk about wayfinding. And Mirror's Edge, I think, is a really good example of it. Dialogue volume 0. Save settings. Zeb, do you know what wayfinding is?
I do, but it's honestly not a topic that I am nearly as well versed in as I probably should be. So, at the very least, I could use a refresher.
I love that you say that because I fear that that is maybe a prevalent thing for game designers and specifically level designers. Wayfinding is a more, I was gonna say it's a more like classic school of design, but it's actually relatively new in all things design. It's essentially, how did I write it down? It's essentially designing systems so that we can orient ourselves and navigate through environments. Typically built environments, sometimes there'll be for like hiking trails and that sort of stuff. But yeah, human intervention to help us get around easier.
Yep.
And then, yeah, when we're talking about it in game design, I don't even know. Like, I've never really seen wayfinding addressed by name in game design stuff.
I have, but more often than not, it's a. I've seen a lot of people specifically bring up the term to have a bit of a whinge about some contemporary game conventions that I don't think are as worthy of critique as some people point out, but I'm getting ahead of myself.
Interesting. Yeah, that's so fair. I mean, I've seen quite a few things on level design which talk about similar elements or elements that would sort of come under wayfinding. Um, Things like landmarks is a big one, right? In wayfinding design, like you want to use landmarks as a way. There's like the way I see it. There's kind of two categories for wayfinding. You have tools, and I keep hitting shift by accident. You have tools and systems. So things like signage and information, and then you have things like landmarks. So landmarks are really common in games. They sort of stem from composition traits. What's the guy come up here? But yeah, essentially, we need to navigate this map, this game, this level, this shopping center, this hospital,
Yep.
and it should be easy. And so, as game designers or as wayfinding designers, we want to use tools to make that happen. If I die here. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I mean, we're playing Mirror's Edge because it is a really good example of strong wayfinding elements. Specifically branding, which I remember studying it and being like, branding? Are you for real? But we think about it more as like an established language, right? I'll give you one guess what the branding is. for Mirror's Edge if you've never seen it. Um, very clear, strong red elements which delineate paths to take, places to go, things to interact with. It's sort of like a gold star in terms of wayfinding if you can have such strong representation for your navigational aid. But yeah, can you think of any other games with super strong wayfinding?
Well, this sort of feels like the perfect segue into the thing that I was mentioning, having seen a lot of complaint about. When because it's largely cited as having been a trend inspired by the red indications in Mirror's Edge, and that is the modern game design trend of the yellow tape.
Yeah, 100%. Um, I feel like that was becoming a thing around when Mirror's Edge came out, right? Because Mirror's Edge is 2007, 2008. I think the first Uncharted was out just before that, maybe a bit
Yeah,
afterwards.
but you don't really see the rise of the like. You definitely see like here's yellow tape on like breakable boxes
Mhm.
back then. Like these are the things that you can interact with in the world. But you see a lot more of like the yellow tape, yellow paint now when it comes to way more of your general wayfinding. Not just here is a thing that you can break, but also here's a thing that you can climb. Here's a thing that's good to jump off of.
Mm,
And it extends into scenarios that, and I've seen people complain about it being like this immersion breaking thing, like feeling that there's yellow paint in this spot, and that's so distracting because it makes it feel like this world isn't real. But at the same time, it is also a wonderful tool of, to be frank, accessibility in the wayfinding design to make it easier for someone to navigate these game environments and not be as confused about how and where you're able to interact with things. Because what I'll observe is that look, I've been playing games all my life, uh, from a fairly young age at least, and that to, to date myself horribly, that takes me back to the early 2000s. So fairly like we'd established 3D games by then, but there was still room to define some rules more clearly. And so, to me, a lot of the rules of how you interact with a game environment, I can make assumptions. I can make assumptions. I can see a space that is an interactable game environment and go, these are probably the things that I can interact with. These are the things that I probably can't. And 9 times out of 10, I'll be right. And that just comes with experience. But at the same time, it's not reasonable to assume that everyone has that kind of experience. And things like the yellow paint, yes, it has the potential of being immersion breaking, but I think it's much more important that it is just a wonderful form of shorthand to indicate to a more casual player, oh, when I see yellow paint, I can climb this ledge. When I see yellow tape on this box, it means that this is a box that I can break, and I don't need to waste 30 minutes of my time swinging my weapon at barrels that are entirely here for set dressing. You know what I mean?
yeah, I do. I feel it's interesting. There's a few like keywords you brought up there, like accessibility, which is an interesting sort of point to revolve a lot of discussion around because I think a lot of design, at least modern design, is almost an accessibility field
Yeah.
to some degree, but also things like you're talking about having that experience playing games, and particularly 3D games, and I think it's interesting to differentiate between a good wayfinding system and that sort of familiarity, right? Like if I'm looking here,
Hmm.
there's a familiarity where I can see the density of all these objects and props,
Hmm.
which trigger this sort of, you know, experienced knowledge that more densely populated parts of the level is where I'm meant to be. Whereas if you look elsewhere, you can sort of see the lack of detail. And if you've played a lot of 3D games, and especially like older ones, if it looks like a flat texture, it's probably not where you're meant to be. Versus
Yeah,
things
100%. And
like the wayfinding system, where we're looking at this is our landmark building, and we've got little red indicators around. It's a, it's a fine line what differentiates it, but I think in
Yeah.
good examples it kind of should be maybe.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's also worthy of note that a lot of the places where the yellow paint technique tends to be used, and I don't want to dwell on the yellow paint thing too long because it's in like the last year or so, it's been a conversation that's absolutely done to death in game design spaces. So I don't want to dwell on it overly. But I think just while we're discussing wayfinding, you sort of can't discuss it without bringing it up
Mm-hmm.
right now, and where it's especially where I see it especially used, and honestly where I think it's especially valuable, is in open world game design, where there's a lot of interactable geometry in the world that, like, as you were observing, you look at this level and you see like, oh, these are the denser areas, so that's probably where I'm meant to go. Whereas these areas are more sparse, that's where I'm not meant to go. But when you're playing an open world game, you don't have as much of that because part of what makes that scarcity, like that sparse environment, not being where I'm meant to go work, is that there are places where you're not meant to go. And in an open world, you're sort of meant to go to a lot of it. And so having things like the yellow paint can be such a valuable way of, even without being able to intuit things about that environment, regardless of whether you have the skill to or not, it's just a very effective way of not only going, more importantly than going, this is the way to go, going, this is a way that is effective to go. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think so. I do need to step away for 1 second though. I'll be right back.
No problem.
I'm back. Did you miss me?
Dreadfully.
um, yeah. So yeah, the shared experience, the sort of familiarity for open world games is different to linear levels for sure, for sure. Um, and I think you nailed it with it's hard to ignore the yellow paint discussion when we're talking about something like this, but that debate has really steered away from wayfinding into that realm of like it's essentially a button prompt at this point, right? And we talked about that last stream. Um,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think part of it's interesting as well because, and this is steering away from it to a degree, uh, but still obviously, sort of, resultant of that discussion, is that I think that part of why that's become so prevalent is because of the level of detail that is now in level geometry. Because I partially say that because a couple of years ago, when the HD ports of the classic Tomb Raider games came out, I remember playing through the first one there, which was wonderful, by the way. I had a great experience with that. But seriously, classic Tomb Raider is awesome. But one thing that was really unique about that was seeing how a lot of like dynamic, like climbing systems that felt very modern in how they were incorporated are present in those games, but they are able to be presented in a very different way, in a much simpler way, because of how simple the level geometry is. Ledges are a flat plane. It is a block. You are faced with so many things that are just flat plane, no slope, and you can look at that and go, ah, so that's something I can climb along. That's something I can grab that ledge because that is one of the flat ledges.
yeah.
And it makes me think that, like, yeah, things like the not just the yellow paint, but in general, novel examples of wayfinding tools to help players understand how they can interact with these much more detailed 3D environments is so beneficial, because it would be so much more distracting if you were exploring an ancient temple in a game that came out this year and you are faced with an object that has just flat edge polygonal lines.
Mm.
Um, like, it just, you can't rely on those systems the same way, especially with, like, let's take the example of, oh, perfect. Horizon Forbidden West. Horizon Forbidden West did something that I actually really like in this regard. And it's a divisive school of thought, and I fully respect that. But there are certain rocky cliff faces and such that can be effectively climbed, and there are those that can't. And this is just part of how that open world is designed, and it's a very high polygonal, detailed open world. So there's not really a lot of, and very natural as well. So there's not a lot of opportunities for that artificial wayfinding design that can be utilized in more city-based level environments. Like with Mirror's Edge, yes, it has the wonderful, wonderful red glow wayfinding tool, and that is exceptional. But that would become only more essential if you were operating in a fully naturalistic environment that doesn't have already architectural wayfinding details, doesn't already have this very geometric design that is relied upon to be able to navigate real-world environments by... I mean, a lot of this stuff is designed by architects as well, and they are using wayfinding tools. But I digress. What Horizon Forbidden West does is that it has a, you know, the classic modern open world scan feature where you press a button and it does a little pulse out, and you can like see items that you can pick up, shit like that.
Yep.
But what it also does is it the idea is it's like a sci-fi scanner thing, so it gets like the topography of your environment in like a simple low poly mesh sort of way, and it indicates to your character Aloy what surfaces she would be able to grab onto, with turning the topography lines for those ones, I believe, yellow instead of gray or yellow instead of blue, something like that. And it essentially turns the environments, in a sense, into those quickly readable, low poly environments where you know what things can be grabbed and what things can't, which would be very, very difficult to be able to cleanly communicate without something like that, just because of how detailed that map is.
Yeah, that's an interesting point in this discussion, right? Because in like day-to-day life, your natural world, you know, is by definition natural, right? And so any design, you know, you got to chalk up to, you know, whatever your sort of preference is there. But in a video game, yeah, the natural world is also designed. It is human made. And so, yeah, I don't know. That's not really a not a topic that had crossed my mind, which is surprising. But I just, you know, I get so wrapped up in wayfinding in level design, the concept of doing that in a naturalistic environment. It's like, oh, that's going to be like a whole new field, right? Because like, if you are out hiking or camping or, you know, for whatever reason, navigating the wilderness, and you've not got like a hiking trail that you're following, even if you are, so much of that navigation is done by, I guess it is wayfinding, isn't it? It's just not like wayfinding design. I read a book on wayfinding called Wayfinding. Let me do this. M.R. O'Connor, Wayfinding, and then it has a subtitle. Really good book, really interesting. It's about it's the Inuit people in the sort of Arctic Circle.
Yep.
The Australian, a couple Aboriginal countries, and who was the last group? I'm trying to think of the correct Polynesian. And those three different, very different geographically distant communities and how they wayfind through the natural environment. And, it goes into a lot of details about things like absolute versus relative navigational systems. So we're talking, an absolute would be your cardinals, your northeast, southwest, versus a relative, which would be, your lefts and your rights. And I believe there was a case for most hunter-gatherer cultures use an absolute system due to its benefits in navigation and wayfinding. But also, there was actually a really cool thing with the sailors on the boats talking about how they could use the ocean swell and the feeling of the waves to help them navigate. Like, they could feel the presence of land masses and islands that they couldn't see in the ocean current, and they would use that to help them pinpoint themselves on a map. Which, once you can pinpoint yourself on a map, you can at least plot a path. And what am I saying? I guess these natural forms, or this form of wayfinding in the natural environment, is so much about what you can do as an individual and what maybe, you've been taught and your culture has passed down to you. Whereas in like these built environments, so much of it is what the environment is giving you to navigate, which I think is a really interesting differentiator.
Well, you actually make a really interesting point on one of the things that I think makes the system in Mirror's Edge really special. And from like a game design standpoint, it's not that different from any of these other things like Aloy's scanner or the yellow paint technique. But it's the world building explanation that the protagonist of Mirror's Edge is Faith, yeah?
Yep. That's right.
Yeah. Faith. And how through, I believe it's stated to be her own personal experience with free running, she's essentially developed an instinct for how to quickly navigate environments. She can tell just by glancing at a space where her immediate handholds are going to be, where her perfect like jumping off points are going to be, where the perfect like stepping stone sort of environmental keystones are. And that's what that red effect is. It's not the level being built to tell you where to go. It's explained as the character intuiting what would be best to interact with to move through the space fluidly, and that being indicated to the player through that red hue.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally called runner's vision, right? It's
Yes, exactly.
and we get to see it come in and out. Like you said, it's if you pay a little bit of attention, it's clearly not paint, and it even shows up when you do. Oh, I mistimed it. Oh, okay. I'm gonna die here. There we go. When enemies attack you with the guns, it's so it's not even in the game strictly limited to the free running. It's like a danger sense in a way, or spider sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of like Spidey sense. But yeah, it's just like communicating the character's instincts and reflexes. And I think that perfectly aligns with what you're describing there as like those experiences of like with sailors developing this skill and understanding to be able to navigate the seas by paying attention to tidal patterns and how that indicates where land masses are. It's it's not dissimilar to that in so many
No,
ways.
I don't remember the specific um, group in the book. Unfortunately, I probably should have written that down. Um, but I know, yeah, they were Polynesian, which I'm hoping is the respectful term to use. Um, I think there's maybe a better one. Apologies. But one of the things that I thought was really cool about that as well, specifically, was they, at least the people that the author spoke to, um, would say it was most effective at night, and especially if you closed your eyes. And I thought it was really interesting how they were sort of saying, your other senses can throw this one off. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's such a fine skill to practice and such a sensitive one that you really need to, yeah, make sure it's not you're not getting noise from your other senses. Because, we rely on our sight and our hearing, at least those of us able to do so. We rely on it so heavily that, yeah. Hi, Darcy. Sorry, I didn't see your message. I hope you haven't been sitting there. Um, but yeah, and so I hadn't considered, I've thought about this game a lot. It's one of my favorites. I love the runner's vision as a system. But yeah, I hadn't really thought about how this is faith navigating a natural environment. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking about what you were talking about with Horizon, and sort of, how we as game designers can guide players through a natural level. Um, and I guess it would be a system like this, right? Like, you kind of want to design the level in a way that mimics real life, right? If you're going for a natural expression, you're trying to create a level that sort of evokes the real world. So you can build it with systems that mimic that, because anyone who's familiar with those systems can then use them to navigate in the game world and get that sort of immersion. But for those who aren't, yeah, it's you can't rely on the world being built for the lowest common denominator, right? And maybe that's why this yellow paint discussion can get so heated, because it's like the world is built to assist you to navigate,
Yep.
whereas a system like Runner's Vision, it's your player character's experience that helps them navigate, not the world sort of serving it up to you.
Yeah, and that's also why I wanted to direct praise towards the system in Horizon Forbidden West, because it's the onboard assistant computer headpiece thing that the protagonist has, scanning the topology of the world around you and going, hey, here is a spot where there are suitable divots so that my human operator could grab onto this.
Mm.
And these spots here are likely too uneven to be able to be reliably used as such. It's sort of almost like it's like an assisted version of the same concept as runner vision.
Yeah. And that, I mean, I guess the other thing that I was going to try and preface at the start, but, didn't get to, is talking about these systems diegetically in a video game, right? Like, you could lump mini maps and maps and, guiding things, button prompts, as all like wayfinding assistance design, but I think it's far less interesting when it's not diegetic. That is like in world explanation. So, yeah, I do love to see it be an in world explanation with that technology piece that Halo has. I saw a video about Peak and they pointed out how I almost got lost. The trees with coconuts are a really cool way to teach the main mechanic of climbing. Yeah. I think I saw that as well. I don't know if I watched the full video, but yeah, I guess for context, Peak, super fun game where you have to climb a mountain. It's sort of similar climbing mechanics to Breath of the Wild, where you have like a stamina bar, and as long as you have stamina, you can climb. Um, but yeah, essentially, that video they were sort of arguing that you get a little thing of hunger almost immediately when you spawn in, and then on the beach it's really sparse. There's not much to climb except for the trees around you, which have coconuts at the top, and so it's like a just a really good example of tutorializing that really naturally. Um, and yeah, that's another. I think that's another point in that camp of like the familiarity that comes with wayfinding. It was a big point made in the book was this idea that um, wayfinding is. I got really distracted with that. I don't normally make this top jump. Wow, that really ruined my train of thought. Wayfinding, it's about encoding memories, right? And to a further extent, I really like this thing where it's like wayfinding or navigation is temporal information, which is, funnily enough, goes back to a conversation I was having on Chris's stream a couple of weeks ago, where we were talking about, kind of the difference between things like painting and photography and film and games in the way that they have a temporal aspect, which opens up a whole other dimension. And yeah, navigation, wayfinding is the same thing, right? Like, it's all well and good to have a piece of wayfinding in one frame of reference temporally, but you need to have often a continuous sort of encoding of that information to be effective at wayfinding.
Interesting.
But yeah, I guess going back to um, Horizon, I gotta go. Good luck with the gym. Thanks. See you. Um, Going back to Horizon, I think there is just like that little bit where I'm like, Aloy was meant to be like a really good, like, hunter, navigator, wilderness person, right? Like, she, if I'm remembering correctly in the first game, you find that piece of tech in your like trials to go and do the exploring. Um,
Yeah.
and so I'm like, it's just a little sad that it's like it's kind of overridden by that technology, you know? Like, maybe it would be too convoluted and not fun in the game, but the idea of being able to climb the walls and like navigate the natural environment is all Aloy's senses, but then when you're encountering all the robot dinosaurs and stuff, that's when the shard or whatever it's called kicks in and like can offer that extra information. Maybe that would be like the most resonant form of that system. I don't know.
I see what you mean. I think for me, I'm satisfied within the context of the narrative and how it presents the themes of the integration of humanity and technology and all of that, with how integrated that is into the player's experience.
Mm.
But I do get what you're saying generally. I think like generally you're right, but I think that Horizon balanced it well.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's fair.
yeah, but yeah. Oh, I had something else that I wanted to say about the just general wayfinding stuff. Oh yeah, right. Because it's interesting the point that you make about as well. So much of our understanding of wayfinding in any given environment being something that is inherently artificial. Um, and not to say like the only forms of wayfinding are artificial, but it's this interesting sort of thing where, as you were observing, as we were both observing, wayfinding is something that just immediately makes sense to be this human experience in artificial structures, because they are built to be navigated by humans. And this becomes more convoluted when we are exploring real world environments, But one thing that I will note that's interesting is within the context of like, you know, walking in forests or jungles or what have you, hiking and such, is that so much of our understanding of the wayfinding process there is often informed by being able to identify interactions with this environment that have occurred with people or beings prior to us. For instance, being able to navigate a forest by seeing that there is a naturally formed path where either people or animals have traversed this area and the plants have been parted and the area has been heavily trodden on, so it no longer has the same level of overgrowth as everything around it.
Mhm.
And it's a path, it's not built, but there's a degree to which that can still be argued to be artificial.
Excuse me. Yeah, no, really interesting point, and I love that as well because it goes with a bit I forgot to bring up with the wayfinding as a temporal um, information, which is that temporality can change based on scale, whether that's size or speed. And so the example you're giving there of following a trail that's been made by other humans or by animals in a natural environment, that can go awry if you accidentally follow like a small game trail, whether it's rabbits or marsupials or whatnot. There's always a little bit of caution to be had if you're following a path to make sure you don't accidentally follow one of those, because you'll then pretty quickly get off track. And I think it's the parallel, I guess, is, oh my god, sorry, flashbang, is in the built environment. We as designers have to really struggle between building an environment that's suitable for on-foot navigation versus in a vehicle, whether that's a car or a helicopter or any other crazy thing that you can do in a video game, right? It's something that Gemma and I have had to been really aware of in Arvo. We're trying to figure out the scale of the map terrain. And we're currently in the middle of trying out a new prototype for the car blueprint. So a lot of it has been done on foot, and it's like, oh, it feels really big. And then it's like, okay, but bring the car over, check it in the car, because that'll change it really significantly.
It almost leads to this fascinating discussion of whether having multiple scales on which you can interact with a map almost prompts this notion of wanting to build the map twice, as it were, so that it is a meaningful environment in one state as much as the other.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think in a large scope, that's definitely where my brain goes. On a confined scope, I start to think of, how can we put gates up which stop you from entering this environment in the wrong state, the wrong scale, So, to put it plainly, how do we stop someone from driving the car into this level that is made to be discovered, explored on foot? Cool first.
I mean, there's validity to that as well. There's validity to that as well, especially because it allows you to really highlight the strengths of those particular toolkits of navigation.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's tough because I feel like similar to the trend we've been talking about with the yellow paint and how that kicked off in like the 2000s. I feel like that was such a trend to take, your third-person shooter, your first-person shooter, and give a vehicle section, or take a vehicle game and do something else. I guess that goes way further back. That goes to like platforming and stuff, right? Where you take your regular platforming and put them underwater. But I feel like players kind of got sick of that, unless it was done really well, or intentionally from the get-go encouraging this split play style. I feel like you can get very sick of being like, okay, well, I'm here to play the driving game, and now I can't drive the car because I'm in the inside bit. It's I feel like the nitpick with the new Spider-Man game, right? Where it's like it's called Spider-Man. I want to play Spider-Man. I don't want to play MJ, the regular human.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I'm cautious. I'm a little wary on making those sort of on foot areas too big or too necessary. Right? I don't want players who just want to drive to feel like they have to do things they didn't sign up for.
I think with that, you've sort of got to acknowledge that the vision of your game is for it to be a game where there is a meaningful part of it that is on foot and a meaningful part of it that is in the car. And so long as you state that up front as much as you clearly can, in like not to get into like marketing discussion, but if you are upfront with an audience, the notion that the game that you are about to play features sections that features content that is best appreciated on while driving a car, and there is also content that is more focused on walking through these more intimate environments and uncovering the story. If you are upfront with that, there is no degree to which someone signed up for one thing and is being given another. You have given them all of the information about what they are signing up for.
Yeah, 100%. No, I think but that's like half the coin, right? Like the other side of the coin is you have to intentionally design levels like that.
Hmm.
I feel like, yeah, I've just seen too many cases where it either was designed to be both halves and it just wasn't marketed that way, or it was marketed that way, but it was never designed to meaningfully be both halves.
Yeah, I think that also sort of, though, more often than not, when I have encountered that phenomenon, it tends to speak more so to an incongruity within the production,
Yeah,
where when there is that degree of like, we were told that it's these two things, but really it's 90% one thing and 10% the other thing. The thing that's there 10% is probably there because the devs were told it was marketable.
yeah. Yeah, we need to put this shot in the trailer so that we get 10% more
Exactly.
click through. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that is way off of off of wayfinding. Um,
Yep.
I
Sorry.
did.
Tangents as usual.
No, all good. But I did write down. I don't know if this was a quote from the book or if I made this quote up and wrote it on my sticky note in my book. But I wrote, "Wisdom sits in places," which I thought was a really interesting little summary. There was this excerpt in the book, and it was someone talking about essentially you want or you should. I cannot have conversations in my ears right now. You should take in as much detail about an environment you're in as possible. The people you talk to will ask questions about it. Knowing about it and being able to talk about it is going to strengthen your mind. You will notice things, you will learn things about the environment you're in, about yourself, and about others. I think is essentially the summary of it. And I'm like, what do you make of that? How do you feel about that?
A lot to digest.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Sorry if the water bottle noise is picked up.
Oh, good.
Um,
My first note, what did I write down? I wrote down control, as in the Remedy video game.
yep.
I also wrote down what do places tell us? And then I was started to think about environmental storytelling, how people use spaces, how people want spaces to be used. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah,
Actually, this is an interesting thing. I can tie together a lot of what we've been talking about, including this, I think, with a game that I remembered is worthy of being part of this discussion a little while back. The original Dying Light.
ooh, lovely pull, love that game.
Oh, it's wonderful. But one of the things that's very interesting about it, also, I am yet to play Dying Light the Beast, but I hear very good things.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm waiting for it to go on. a reasonable sale because I am broke.
Yeah, it'd be like that. Um, yeah, the thing that is so interesting with the original Dying Light is it was one of the first games that I personally encountered to really commit to the yellow paint, yellow tape thing.
Mm.
But there was a very strong justification for that in the narrative because your character is one of many people that are scavengers in these cities that have identified if we stick to the streets, that's where the zombies are. We will be killed. Because for any that don't have full context, Dying Light is an open world parkour action game set in a zombie post apocalypse. And so when you are being able to use these yellow paint and yellow tape markers in the environment that are indications of here's a good efficient climbing spot, here is a good leaping off point, in similar sort of design utilization to Runner-Vision in Mirror's Edge. It is because there were people implied in this story that are doing the same thing as you that were leaving behind markers to other runners to go, hey, here is a good spot to leap up here so that you don't end up on the street getting chowed down upon by zombies. And it's wonderful in that sense of like it's mechanically satisfying, it's part of the world building, and on top of all of that, it's also this wonderful example of the collective knowledge of human beings aiding one another in an environment that, while being artificial, it's a city, has become an unfamiliar wilderness with the incursion of these zombies.
I, you're so right, and I'm so upset because I didn't think about that a couple of years ago when I had my wayfinding class. Um, at uni, I did a wayfinding elective, and the assessment was essentially go to a place, assess its wayfinding system, make suggestions to improve it. And I had a very cool lecturer who let me, instead of going to a real physical location, let me do the first level of Mirror's Edge. And one of the really interesting things I learnt about, well, one of them was using the human senses to encourage or discourage navigation, which was really confusing to me because I'm like, it's a video game. Like the only senses we have is sight, sound, and maybe some tactility with controller vibration. And my lecturer was like, no, but like if you see something that looks like it would smell bad, the human brain is going to react with, oh, that smells bad. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. But more relevant to this, I was inspired by Thieves' Cant and I think it's called the Hobo Code, which I don't know if that's, the nicest word. But essentially this idea of like a secret language of symbols to indicate things. And so I came up with a whole set of systems for things that would be like, turn left here, turn right here, there's a door that's unlocked. Guards patrol this roof. Those sorts of symbols that would be helpful for a runner in this city. And yeah, I came up with all of that from other routes and never once thought Dying Light, which is a game that had already done that.
And it does exactly that. There are, if memory serves, because I could absolutely be talking out my ass here, but I feel like I remember there being like specific symbols for certain like spots that could be used as safe camps, and there were particular ways, like there would be certain ways that like paint would be laid out in certain ways to indicate how you're going to interact with a certain thing. There would be a piece of yellow cloth wrapped around something that can be swung underneath, and stuff like that, that not only has this thing of the yellow is the color that is meant to draw your attention, pay attention to the yellow, but then what it is that you are seeing that is yellow also tells you how you're going to interact with it and what purpose it will serve to you. If you're going, I need a spot to swing from so that I can maintain my level of elevation, you're looking not just for the yellow, but for the yellow cloth. If you're going, shit, I need a base camp so that I can not be eaten by the super bad night zombies that are particularly dangerous, then you are searching for the paint pattern that is used to indicate one of these safe camps. And what's extra interesting, just from a game design standpoint, about this, that isn't technically solely wayfinding, but I think is wonderful from a game design standpoint in how it relates to the wayfinding in the game, is that Dying Light has this very core feature where you are meant to... It is just so clearly stated to you how much more dangerous it is to be out at night. There are monsters that are significantly more dangerous, faster, more damaging, more health, that only come out at night. And as such, you can also get some better rewards that are specifically available at night. But this also plays in a really interesting way into the thing with the wayfinding, with the yellow indicators, with like the... Why did I emphasize that like that? With the yellow indicators, like the paint and the cloth and what have you, because it's not fluorescent. That's just going to be harder to see at night. The thing that you rely on that is this way that you are engaging with this in-world community of people that have put themselves through the same danger that you are to make it safer for you. You can't rely on what they have done for you the same way that you would have otherwise.
Sorry. The train came out of nowhere. They should put those on a set path so that people know. Yeah, I think I'm gonna wait here. The other thing that I was thinking about with Dying Light was they have all the traps that you could activate, right?
Yep.
And I'm like, it's been so long since I played the first Dying Light, but it's like I could swear they had symbols for those different traps as well.
Yes. Yes, that's part of what I was remembering with the safe bases and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they did have indicators for the traps as well.
Very cool, good wayfinding solutions. Oops.
Oh, that's right. And then there was actually something with the second game as well, which widely considered not as good for very good reasons. But one thing that was really cool was that it had the highly infected zones, where there were certain spots that lots of the powerful zombies were using as hideaways during the day. And this is a game where you are absolutely slipping in through windows and doors of buildings to try to get where you're going to go. And those buildings also had these yellow paint indicators going, hey, there's some bad shit in here. If you are running through this city, jumping through windows to try to get to safety, there is not safety in here.
Yeah. What is it? Don't dead open inside?
Don't dead open inside. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Diegetic wayfinding in games is like, you know, I feel like 10 years ago, maybe a bit longer, there was so much praise for games with environmental storytelling, and I feel like diegetic navigation wayfinding is maybe like top tier of that, right?
Oh yeah.
Like all those examples in Dying Light are just so interesting. Mirror's Edge is praised so much because it has interesting story and character implications. And I think, yeah, like, you know, if you're not tying your navigation into the story, players will sort of be like, ah. Oh, I jumped off too soon? They'll notice, and they... Oh. Well, that's embarrassing.
It happens.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, if I was in charge of a video game, I would be scared to suggest in-world explanations for navigational stuff.
You are in charge of a video game.
Yeah, and we're not doing it. Oh, there's no train there. I should have looked before I jumped. This does not normally take me this many tries. I swear.
It's fine. I didn't get this far when I originally played Mirror's Edge. I still haven't finished it.
Oh, you should. It's so good.
I know,
um,
I know. I know it's not long either. I just haven't.
but this is all this conversation has also completely glossed over the sort of architecture of it all, right? Like, I wrote control down there. I can't think of like super strong wayfinding in control. I remember the map being cool, but a little tricky to learn. The elevator to be a little bit confusing. Um, but the architecture is so good. Oh my gosh. Oh. The architecture in Control is so good, and so many levels have such a strong design which impact the way you navigate the levels themselves, right? Not to mention the way in which areas will evolve after you have activated the checkpoints in them and change the architecture, which changes the way you sort of move through the space and interact with it. Like, how many arenas would you clear and then you would, like, you know, hit the checkpoint, I forget what they're called, and like it would open up and turn into this whole environment to explore with new avenues to go down. I'm like, what a really interesting dynamic sort of wayfinding solution for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't
Well,
know if I've seen it
actually,
done again.
that actually leads me to an interesting comparison with a mechanic from Alan Wake 2.
Right. Go ahead. I think I know where you're going, but
Maybe. Who knows? We'll see. When it specifically comes to within the dual protagonist structure, the sequences where you play as Alan Wake himself.
Hmm.
Um, this is technically also a thing to a degree with Saga, but it's way clearer for this point of comparison with Alan's systems. Um, is that he has the puzzle solving mechanic of the ability to rewrite the story for the environment that he is in, and it literally does change the environment that you are exploring.
It's
First off,
such
just
a neat mechanic. It's
yeah,
so
just
cool.
just flat out, I love that mechanic. It's such a cool way of incorporating the premise of the Alan Wake story and character into this really like visually unique puzzle solving system. It's so much fun. But also, what's interesting there is that the best way I can put it is the wayfinding is communicated by paying attention to what has changed.
Yeah.
When you are opening up new things to understand and explore about your environment, new things to interact with, new pathways that you can go down, how that's communicated to you is by having changed something, the world changing around you and going, hey, shit, that wasn't there before. And that's not so much playing on like understanding of 3D environments, so much as it is just recognition of your own space, paying attention to what's around you. Because you don't need to know how game levels work to go, there wasn't a couch there before. You know?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I thought today would be a lot of talking about, as a designer, wayfinding systems and, you know, how we can take tricks that we use in the built environment and apply them to video game levels. But it's really interesting that instead it's turned into how we can use our natural human wayfinding abilities to communicate in games, in virtual worlds. Because, you know, like, Alan Wake 2, less so than Control, like, the wayfinding, yeah, it's relying on your human perception and, you know, Alan's sort of writer's knowledge to change how you navigate the environment, even if the environment doesn't necessarily change that much, you know? Like, I'm thinking about the theater, I think, and how, like, maybe a door would unlock, you know, or like some things would change, but so often I felt like the environment would change lighting and tone, and so the way it would impact sort of your presence in the space, right? It would go from being, you know, one sense of horror and mystery to another. You know, it'd go from being
Hmm.
like, "Ooh, something bad happened here," and like that's creepy, to there might be someone here with me who is trying to get me, and I need to run and hide.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, that's, you know, not like, oh dear, Faith. That's tapping into some very like base principles of wayfinding, of how we navigate,
Hmm.
yeah, the natural world, even though these are all built environments in a virtual world.
I mean, not only that, within this context, they are built environments in a virtual world being adjusted by how you interact with it.
Yeah, that is
But nevertheless, it does play. It's so interesting. It's creating an unknown for yourself.
yeah.
Which, I mean, obviously, there's some wonderful, wonderful mental health themes going on with the character of Alan Wake concerning that element, but that is not the topic for
Oh,
today.
no, maybe another day.
Oh yeah.
um I think it's one of my least favorite segments, but that's okay, we'll push through. I'm also trying to read my notes at the same time. Yeah, talking about
Yeah,
how
bold,
people
bold
use
choice.
spaces and how spaces want to be used. How people want spaces to be used. I should be looking where I'm going. Apologies. Um okay. I go
Yeah,
up.
it's interesting as well. It's interesting as well because I find it interesting that we've only really talked about like impromptu examples of signage as an element of wayfinding.
How so?
Well, like at least with what little degree
Uh
of study I have done on wayfinding, there is very much this degree to which, when applied to real life scenarios, one of the most common go-to here's how to make an environment navigable is through just very literal signage. If you put a sign that says toilets this way somewhere, that will help someone know to go that way to find toilets.
yeah.
It very, very rudimentary call and response stuff, but um, I don't know. I guess I just find it interesting that, as you were saying, like we've been so focused on this very like human element factor to wayfinding that we sort of have been more focused on how to communicate that than the sort of architectural mechanics of it all.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I see what you mean. Like, we're talking about signage, and it's like yeah, like you said, impromptu. We're talking about like dying light with like somebody else left something that could be interpreted as a sign. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, it was interesting. I remember the assessments that we did were presentations, and so I got to see a lot of other people's presentations, and they were so sign heavy, you know, like
Hmm.
um, which makes sense. Like, it's not by no means a dig or anything, but yeah, in the real world, you don't know what experience navigators are looking for. And so, like, the most practical, helpful tool is a big old sign that says, "You are here. Here's this place and this place and this place and this place and this place, and here's how to get there." Um, and yeah, you know, in games, it's like nobody's gonna want to stop to read that. You know, we've already got quest logs and NPCs giving us dialogue. Like, we don't want a little information sign. Um,
Hmm.
but I think it's interesting because I think a lot of people also don't want to stop and read a sign. You know, like sign posting can be effective and can be helpful, but actual information signs are less so. And I think that's maybe why we see places like hospitals. They still have them, but things are color coded. Oh, you're looking for this ward, you want to follow the green paint. And I remember that we got some examples that were so cool with hospitals where like the sort of intended demographic would really influence it. Like if you're looking for the children's ward at the hospital, you'll be pretty confident you're there if you're seeing a lot of like murals with a lot of friendly animals or like other like child related sort of aesthetics. Where am I going? Oh, up there. But that's a whole separate thing to this. But I mean, that trend, that moving away from a lot of information to these more instinctual, I think is a really valuable lesson for games. And also something I feel like is often overlooked in level design is what is it called, like route assurance. This idea that like it's all well and good to show somebody, hey, you're trying to get to this location, this is the direction to go, good luck. But you've kind of failed. Even if your user gets to the destination they were looking for, you failed if they felt like they were going the wrong way at any point. And I feel like that happens a lot in games, so much so to the point where I was seeing this interesting article on Wayfinding games where they were talking about, players have an instinctual desire to follow the critical path, like the intended path forwards last. Any other path might have helpful tools or resources or interesting things to find, and so players are always going to want to look for that first. And yeah, so I think something like route assurance, which I rarely see in games, this idea of like information to reassure the player that they are going the right way, would be really helpful. Because then, you can go, oh, I see a path over here. It's not got any of the markers or the assurance to tell me that's the right way to go. So that's got to be a secondary path with cool hidden secrets that I can go find. And I think I remember watching I don't remember who it was. Somebody put up a video about how they go about level designing, and they were talking about those framing moments, where you walk into a space, well, like this, you walk into a space and you sort of see the target, and they were talking about how you got to do that at the start and you want to do that at the end. They were also demonstrating this principle of narrow open. So you start in an open area, you get funneled into somewhere narrow to come back out into an open area, and you kind of want to keep doing that. It's sort of like good pacing, it feels good. But when you typically get into those narrow spaces, you lose sight of the landmark, and you can become unsure of the path ahead, right? I think games benefit from, like I was saying earlier, where it's like the level of detail, those sort of things. Like there's this assumed experience that you would have in a 3D game. But also, there is another thing of like, if I am existing in this part of the virtual level and the game hasn't stopped me, then it's probably because I'm going the right way. Or at the very least, I'm going somewhere I'm allowed to. Which, a lot harder to replicate that in the real world.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's like very good, right? Like here, it's like, is this the right area? Like, I know I want to get that way, but like, should I go over here? Like, there's no assurance that I'm on the right path. I actually don't remember where I'm going. I think I normally just like...
Well, you're upping your point.
I normally just kind of skip this somehow. like that. I don't know if I meant to do that.
Well, it let you.
Got him. But yeah,
Um,
so I would love to see more
yeah.
route markers and route assurance in video games. That's my
Mhm.
that's my
So
goal.
I have an interesting element of this whole discussion to bring up, and it partially actually plays into the whole thing of that whole discussion that came up under the yellow paint thing of the discussion of immersion versus accessibility when it comes to wayfinding.
Oh, interesting.
So this is a specific one. It's a weird angle on this because it's very unique to a game design perspective. Not even necessarily specific to like video game design, because this could just as easily apply to something like a hedge maze or even an escape room. And that is, how can you use wayfinding tools to make sure that an end user is not actually lost. They are being directed in the right way, but feel like the environment is built for them to be lost.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of the goal of good level design, right?
Mm-hmm. To a
Especially
meaningful
in,
degree, yeah.
this the sort of popularity of the action adventure exploration genre.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Gemma makes a good point. The old, if you run into enemies, it means you're going the right way. Another good way to be,
Mm-hmm.
Suggesting the correct path. I don't know. It's just it. There is a level though where I'm like the amount of times I've gotten lost and come into these like liminal spaces because it was an arena with enemies and it no longer is, and it's like I know at one point this is the right way to go, but now I don't. I don't
Interesting.
know. That feels like a
Yeah,
more
it's also
systemic problem though than just a good wayfinding solution.
yeah, it's also interesting with the notion of if you run into enemies, you're going the right way. Because for me, I'm very familiar with playing a lot of games where like I've discussed like character action games. And in a game like Devil May Cry or Lost Soul Aside, Ninja Gaiden, if you run into enemies, that means that you are, in fact, not going the way that you've already came. You are told nothing else by that because there are enemies everywhere. Because the point is that you are finding enemies. A lot of the
Mm.
times, the secrets on the optional paths will be more enemies.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's only effective in certain genres, and I think that's like, even more broadly an interesting. Did I miss the button? An interesting thing about games, right? And like, it's such a young art form, such a young medium that we don't have common words. We don't have common ways to express things. Like we can, for a certain group of people, that's a really helpful, little tidbit, rule of thumb. But then, like you said, for another group of people, it's like, well, it's not really helpful at all. And we just don't have an effective shared communication form in that way.
Yeah. And yeah, because like really interesting comparison here between two games by very similar developers actually, because same publisher. Um, Capcom's Resident Evil versus Capcom's I'm gonna say Devil May Cry 3. Because in Devil May Cry 3, most of the optional secrets that you're going to find are fights against a different group of enemies that will provide some interesting reward or challenge. And not only that, but as you explore back through environments, more often than not, if you go through a load zone, enemies are going to respawn.
Yeah.
But you compare that to the original Resident Evil, where not only do enemy deaths persist, but you actually want to be avoiding combat a lot of the time And one of the core ways that they balance resource management in the original Resident Evil is that you kill enemies on paths that you expect to be going back through a lot.
Yeah.
Because enemy deaths are persistent. If you have killed the enemies there, then this path that you're expecting to go back and forth down, like potentially upwards of 10 times, isn't going to have new threats for you. And this is a really interesting dichotomy because it's such different experiences, but both are very much discussions of that same notion of it's two different thoughts of if you run into enemies, you're going the right way. But in one case, it's... Sorry, I'm needing to reorganize my thoughts a little bit. In one case, you're not being told anything about whether there are enemies here. You might have been in this room. This might be a new room that's the way to go. This might be a new room that is completely off the beaten track and is giving you absolutely nothing other than enemies to fight. But there are enemies everywhere. You are not told anything by there being enemies. And in the other case, you are told that you are in a place that you've already been to if there are no enemies there, but that's a choice that you made. That's actually driven by something you have done, not just in how the game was designed, but also how you have exacted your agency within these systems.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough.
And I mean, those are two games by the same publisher that came out within 10 years of one another.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't know if it's an issue. You know, like,
I definitely wouldn't say that it's an issue.
yeah, no, I mean, like, am I overthinking it? You know, is my quest for a really nice wayfinding system sort of like overshadowing the fact that like a lot of players want to explore? Sort of like what you're saying before about, you know, like, how do we help players navigate but let them get lost and let them explore? And it reminds me of sort of the design philosophy for puzzle games, stuff like Portal 2, right? You know, where it's like, you never want the player to be confused by where they have to go, just how to get there.
Yeah, well, actually, this is actually an interesting thing, is that the best examples that I have seen of systems that present you with great ways of both having the opportunity to explore and having clear opportunities to be wayfinded to where you are trying to get are non-diegetic ones.
Interesting.
I'll use a weird example. And this is a very, very, like, generous non-diegetic wayfinding system, but it makes sense for the context that I'm presenting it in. And I will say that this is in a game that I like, but whether this system is anyone's particular cup of tea is entirely a matter of discretion. It's not a popular game. Is the I'm trying to figure out how to properly introduce this one. The game is Sword Art Online Alicization Licorice.
Okay.
It is an action RPG game that's part of the Sword Art Online anime and light novel franchise. I can't recommend the anime, but I've had a really good time with some of the tie-in games. Anyway, not the point. The point is, the game uses semi-open world design, or I think it's called... I think people have called it like open map design or open stage design,
Interesting.
where you are given a selection of overworld maps that can be freely explored like an open world, but are separated by load zones from one another. And so you're essentially given lots of mini open worlds that link to other mini open worlds, and each of those will have side quests, optional battles, treasure to uncover, all that sort of shit. But what's very interesting in that one is just how generous it is with its optional wayfinding tools, because it's just the most literal, ultra helpful wayfinding thing of you press a button and it draws a path out for you on the ground like a GPS, telling you which way, telling you a route to get to your quest objective that you have selected. And this is then also, again, you can switch it off whenever you want, and it is in a an environment that has plenty of winding paths to explore other things. And I partially mention this because it reminds me of the conversation you were talking about earlier with the players want to go down the optional paths first.
Yeah.
If you are in a semi-linear level and you see that there is a crossroads, you want to go the wrong way first because that's where the secrets are. And that's where I can see a system like the one in Alicization Licorice being very helpful, is that it's literally a button that you can press that goes, oh, this is the right way to go. And so you can go, all right, saving that for later.
Yeah, I guess it's tough because it's like there's
I will say, of
also
course, within the context of this discussion, it's not a satisfying solution. It's super non-diegetic. It is just a freebie solution to the problem. But it is a starting point for that discussion. You know what I mean?
yeah. It feels. I mean, like, there's a whole discussion around Mirror's Edge Catalyst, right? Because they added a similar GPS line to the runner's vision, and it was sort of like, why would we want that? But it's interesting because it's like, I think it's at least mostly true. This idea that players will want to go down the secondary path first. But also, I have a lot of personal experience with optimizing the fun out of a game.
Yeah.
And, and also it's like, it actually reminds me of what I was saying earlier about the Polynesian sailors waiting till night and closing their eyes to feel the currents to drown so that the other senses can't, interfere. It's like, once I know where the path is, it's really hard to explore. It's like my brain is like, just go down the main path, or like every choice I make, I'm never making the choice of this might be the way I need to go. It's like, well, I know which way I need to go. Now I just need to explore the other areas. And it's tough.
I guess that sort of then is then you're prompted by the discussion of different player mentalities, where even when you are designing something with like an expected audience in mind, like we've been talking so much about how like certain tools will work to communicate within certain genres better than others, but hell, even that can be a flawed dichotomy because two different people playing the same game may have vastly different experiences with those same wayfinding tools in the same exact game. Because with the example that I've just given you, I completely agree from that sole perspective of like, this is a gameplay experience that has the capacity to optimize the fun out of it, wherein there is no question of which way is the right way, which way is the wrong way. And like any prompt to explore an optional path is something that you are choosing to not go down the right path to do that. But I can also say from my personal experience, I am absolutely a person that will identify what the right path is and still go down the wrong path because I want to find goodies and such. Like the example that you gave earlier of like other gamers claiming to do the same. And so for me, while I do find that system to be a sort of, I'll say it's a bit of a droll answer to the problem, it does nevertheless lead me to a place where I can go, okay, this is the path to go for the story. Let's try a couple other paths for treasure first.
Yeah. Sorry, I just had to Google something.
You're right.
Gemma, going down the wrong path is optimizing my gameplay. Yeah. I don't know. It just, and I think honestly, more of this, like, 100% what you're saying about like catering to different players or expecting building a different player experience based on the target, right? And it reminds me a lot of the discussion around assistance tools, and how we can effectively communicate, what is the intended gameplay experience versus what is a modified one to assist players. Because,
Yeah.
there's nothing inherently wrong with Mirror's Edge Catalyst having this GPS line appear, but I think it's pretty fair to say it shouldn't have been on by default. It
Yeah,
maybe
I think
should have been a setting that was buried a little bit further away, so the players don't turn it on and then ruin their own experience.
Can I make another observation in this case?
Please.
I think that we have now found a third point of changing of that modifies how valuable certain systems are or are not in a game. Because yes, it is important to acknowledge the style and genre of the game, the intention of that game. It is worth exploring the individual player experiences, how different people will have different versions of that same experience, different things that they are looking for. But also, Catalyst brings in the interesting observation of additional gameplay context. Where the best way I can put it in this case is whether or not that is a good idea, is it a good idea for a Mirror's Edge game?
Yeah.
Is that a good idea for a sequel to something that already has certain answers worked in, where players will have certain expectations, or can be assumed to have certain expectations, if they are coming from that first game? Are there design mentalities that you actually want to steer clear of because they fly in the face of what someone familiar with this game would be used to? Would be looking for, even.
Why did I just do the same wrong thing twice? Sorry. No, that's a really interesting point. The context of the game itself. Yeah, because it's like, it makes a lot more sense to have a GPS line in a game like GTA, where you have a literal GPS on your phone in-game that you can use. Oh, I was too slow. I died. I fainted. Now I can't help but think about... Oh, excuse me. Think about what different systems... Why did I do that? Just didn't press the button. Would be really good fits for Catalyst. Because my brain immediately thought of... like, in Dark Souls... Or I guess, sorry, Elden Ring is the popular reference these days. You can see the ghosts of other players. And you get to see a glimpse of, what they were doing. Well, if you click a bloodstain, you get to see what they were doing just before they died. But otherwise, you'll just see ghosts randomly appear. I'm thinking about Mirror's Edge Catalyst set up this whole social feature where you have an echo, which is like the imprint of like where your route. And I'm like, that would be so much more of an interesting wayfinding tool that is very diegetic and fits the context and the theme, but is more assistive than just Red Runner's vision, seeing glimpses of the in-game characters' routes they take through this open world. Because I think the other issue, you're talking about the context of the game, right? I think having a GPS route in a open world game, specifically an open world Mirror's Edge game, is bad. And, I think critical reception sort of agreed with that. And one of the issues with it is that, it gives you one route to follow through what is meant to be an open world with a bunch of different paths you could take. Now, I think there are some fundamental level design issues in Catalyst which make it really feel like there's only 2 or 3, sometimes a single route through certain areas of the map, which is just, there's no wayfinding that can help with that. That's just not a big enough sort of environment. But if you then slap a line that runs through and shows a single full path, it's like, well, there it is. But if you had like multiple ghost segments to show direction and, you know, specific interactions with some of the more difficult parts, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is also exactly the thing that was that I think we were both praising the original Dying Light for so much, is that in a lot of regards, Dying Light is a very mechanically similar game to Mirror's Edge in how you move through it. Like, obviously, the Mirror's Edge has much more of a focus on the complexity of its mobility. Oh my goodness.
I got
That looks
absolutely
ridiculous.
bodied.
But Dying Light, nevertheless, it succeeds at being an open world. It succeeds at having a strong focus on that parkour movement and wayfinding you well in that, while still not making your options feel too limited. And I think that part of the issue, honestly, is Mirror's Edge Catalyst wanted to be an open world game while still also being a linear Mirror's Edge game, and it didn't. And I feel like its lack of commitment in either direction is ultimately one of the biggest sources of its downfall.
Yeah, I'll go as far as to say the linear level segments of that game were some of the best, not just the best levels, the best parts of Catalyst, but some good just Mirror's Edge levels.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's yeah, very accurate for this.
And yeah, it ends up in this situation where even the open world parts of Catalyst feel like they have been designed by someone that wants it to be a linear level, I guess, or doesn't want to make too much openness, doesn't want to have to make too much map even.
Yeah.
And that was simply Dying Light knew right out the gate, this is an open world parkour game. And the way that it integrates the yellow highlight features in its map are such a perfect way of going, here are some optimal spots to get a good leap. But it isn't telling you this is the only way to go. It's giving you options that you can react to quickly and effectively.
Sorry.
You're right.
I had to be a very character accurate face for a second there and gun down a bunch of cops. It's interesting. Sorry, I suddenly smelt my candle too much. I was like, is it burning? It's interesting how this game, the first Mirror's Edge, ran into a lot of black for all the combat in it. Which is, I would say, fair. It feels weird and it's not the best and just doesn't make sense for the context of the game. But it's interesting how Catalyst also picked that up. Maybe less so, because I feel like back in the day, I remember people talking about Mirror's Edge and being like, imagine if it was open world. And so they picked that up for Catalyst, but I'm like, when you play Catalyst, I think one of the weakest points is the open world. And it's interesting that both games suffered from, you know, there's this idea that Mirror's Edge needed to have gunplay because of when it came out and what games were like when it came out. Sort of making the game fit expectations rather than letting the game breathe and be its strongest version. And yeah, it's interesting that you could say the same thing happened to Catalyst, where it sort of caved to expectations and it turned out to be worse for it.
Yeah, and it's such a shame because the things that make the Mirror's Edges so different from other games, or at least games from their time, are the things that people remember them for.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not trend. They're not on trend. But they're still really good. Well, I don't know. I am planning to go back and play Catalyst actually. Um, Chris has asked me to pick up some gameplay footage of it, so I figured I might as well stream it. So I will be
Huh.
live
I
through the
should
week playing it.
I should probably give it another shot at some point. I played it for a little bit a few years ago back on my old laptop, so that would have been like probably like 2020, 2021, something like that. And for some reason, whenever I tried to play it on that laptop, the laptop blue screened. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, yeah. So bonus points to the game. Not only is it mediocre, it also broke my computer repeatedly.
Dang. Well, if you want to live vicariously through me, yeah. Um, yeah, I'm gonna give it a go. I want to. I've just. I didn't mean to fall back into this, but I've been thinking about wayfinding. It's probably a good time to be thinking about it though, considering my current task with Arvo is making the map. Um, this is such a good example of what we were talking about before, right? Where it's like there's a crossroad here, one of these is the right path, and this symbol tells me there's a collectible bag down the other one.
Mm,
My sense would be that this offshoot path is where the bag is. The rat didn't help me. The rat came this way and went that way. I got no idea what that means.
mm.
But I think this is actually the critical path.
So I guess we still need to acknowledge the incredible wayfinding potential of animal went that way.
Oh, you want to talk about Skyrim? Did you did you ever know about that? And did you see that the answer to that? I'm talking about the foxes that would find treasure in Skyrim.
I do not know about this.
So there was a rumor that went around when Skyrim came out that sometimes foxes in the game would lead you to treasure. And so players would follow the foxes, and essentially to break the illusion, what would happen is that the foxes would lead you to bandit camps and other points of interest.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which is just like factually, it did happen. Foxes tended to lead players to points of interest in the map. Um,
Mm-hmm.
really interesting though that like this rumor started around it, and some people were like, "Wow, what a like really interesting design choice! Like to think of that and have that be a thing." But it turns out it was just a quirk of how games are made, where you have nav meshes, which are essentially invisible polygons over the map, which typically NPCs will use to determine where they can navigate. So most of the map should be covered in them. Otherwise, they won't be able to, a player could stand somewhere they couldn't get, that the NPCs couldn't get to. But yeah, essentially what was happening is those nav meshes, because Skyrim's an open world game, they, like any polygon, they will add to the compute time and the size and whatnot. So to be space efficient, you cluster those in areas where you expect the player to encounter a lot of NPCs, like in, bandit camps and the like, because you need them to be able to move at a finer resolution to react to the player. But in the big open world areas, you use fewer of them because there needs to be like less refined navigation. So you've got these big open world areas with big nav meshes, and then the close ones still in the open world around points of interest. And what would happen is that due to like probability and the way that triangles work, the foxes would navigate towards the clusters, because if you are looking at the number of nav mesh tiles, it looks like more tiles means bigger area. But because they were clustered in a small location, it sort of acted like a black hole or a sinkhole where any NPCs using the nav mesh would end up gravitating towards them.
Interesting.
There's a really good Twitter thread if you dare to venture onto that platform, which explained it way better than that.
I do not.
But yeah, really cool. Happenstance, just a few game development things lined up in a way that made it so that foxes would lead you to bandit camps where there would be treasure and rewards. But yeah,
But you end up with this sort of circumstantial, spiritual situation where it's almost like foxes are guiding you to wealth.
yeah, and that's in a newer game that would be really explicit. It'd be like the spirit guardians will lead you to to wealth and to treasure and things that are interesting.
It's funny that you mentioned that because this is exactly a mechanic in Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's good. I think it's a really cool thing. And this goes back to everything we've been talking about, where it's like you could do it in a way that feels a bit artificial, right? Like if you press a button and it just runs down a path, it's like, that feels like it's just a GPS for oldie times. But if you lean into that sense, and I think if it's not something the player has active agency over, it's a really fun way to be like, no, this is part of the world. And if you're lucky, you do something and don't even realize, and you get this really fun sort of emergent player story out of it, right? This shared rumor that had some truth to it, which allowed it to spread.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? Hold on, one sec.
Yeah, good. I gotta lock in. This is one of the worst combat arenas. Oh, and I threw my gun. Where's my gun gone? Oh dear. Butterfingers. Okay. I am getting close to the end of the game, so I think it would be really nice if I could wrap it up. But I'm also running out of discussion topics. I've got 2 pages of notes here, and I've somehow managed to get through most of it. Decision making. Oh yeah, I guess there is. I know Zeb is muted, and will join us again hopefully, at some point. But there is a conversation to be had about the. This goes back to sort of what I was talking about. Oh, welcome back.
To continue.
No, this is actually good timing because I was just about to jump into a new discussion point, which is and it goes back to what I was talking about with the root assurance stuff, and that is how being sure of your wayfinding can free up some of your cognitive loads. And what I've sort of been learning through my game design journey is how critical that cognitive load is to the player experience, right? We specifically, I feel like, kind of got a crash course in that when we were working on our capstone project, and we're learning how far we need to dial back tutorialization. Because anything too complex very easily could overwhelm a player. And if a player is overwhelmed, they're not going to learn. They're not going to have fun, that's for sure. And they're more likely to put the game down. So being able to set a really clear path for players, whether it is, very explicitly, here's the critical path, or whether it goes back to that puzzle design, like here is the goal, figure out how to achieve it. You don't want the player's brain to be taken up with, you know, how do I get there? That's not the fun part of games for the most part. Or where am I going, sorry, more than how do I get there. And I think, all we need to do, what I like about wayfinding is like, it's so like wayfinding, what I've been talking about from the book and these ideas of, wayfinding in the natural world, it's so ingrained as a part of human behavior, I think. To the point where there's things of in the book the author talks about how the decision making, the route finding, wayfinding is a skill that can be practiced, should be practiced because it's good for the brain. Doing some early. The book is a few years old, so it's not like super up to date. Oh shit! But talking about like things like the strength of the hippocampus in the brain, differing between people. I think it was cab drivers in London who, there's a whole thing about them being super knowledgeable of all the streets and, not needing to use maps to get around in London. Is that what I said? And how much grey matter they have in certain parts of the brain. And so I've lost the plot here. It's a really important part of the human experience. And I think games can be used to help strengthen that.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well because it sort of ends up coming back to the thing that I was talking about earlier with the thing of I've been playing 3D games all my life. I know what's going on. I know how to navigate 3D spaces. I tend to understand what the rules of game design are. I can tell when there's going to be an invisible wall long before I know that there's an invisible wall.
Yeah.
And it comes into these interesting questions when it comes to like designing for wayfinding in game environments. Of like, I guess the best way I can put it is you observe that this is very much a skill to be developed. And it comes into this question of, do you want to create games for people that want to develop the skill of playing games? Or for people who have developed the skill of playing games? Or do you want to make games that can feel enjoyable immediately without needing to learn how to navigate this new dimensional environment?
Interesting.
Without someone needing to understand the unique rules that apply to environments in game design that are completely distinct from experiences of navigating real-world spaces.
It's interesting that you took it in that direction because this discussion point, it's in my brain, it occupies this space of and this is probably a really good example of my bias, having read this book, which the author did offer counterpoints of view to some of the specifics. Oh, really? Back and stuff? But ultimately, a lot of the viewpoints in the book agree practicing wayfinding, practicing navigation is good for you and you should engage in it. To what extent and to how you do that is sort of, left a bit more open. But yeah, so I've come at this whole topic where it's like we should be engaging with it, we should be practicing it, and games can offer a really safe way to replicate those, I think, really well. Like, not every game, of course, but I think there's a good lot of games where if you play them and maybe, you intentionally don't use some of the more explicit tools, you really have to engage that skill. And when it comes to, talking about what sort of players are going to play it, I think ideally And I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like a lot of games they're in a really sweet spot where it's like if you practice those skills regularly, the game is just a good environment to, just practice it more, like it's maybe not super difficult, but you're still engaging those that thought process, those skills. And if you are really unfamiliar with that sort of form of navigation and wayfinding, then it's a really safe environment to start building those.
Hmm. That is very interesting because I think part of where I'm coming at that statement as well is it's as I observed like with certain elements of game design where I've been able to watch games grow and uh like 3D games at the very least. And so a lot of the sort of design language that goes into interacting with a 3D space in a game is something that's very implicit to me, very intrinsic. I don't need to necessarily know things. This isn't me like trying to toot my own horn or anything. This is just purely this is a familiar environment, as it were. Um, hold on 1 second.
You're all good. We are coming up on final cutscene, final part of the game. If I remember the route. So we're probably coming up to end of stream. We're at an hour 50, which feels good for us. But yeah, I guess it's sort of closing thoughts. I think we should engage in wayfinding more. I remember watching a lot of 3D artists and the way they talk about walking down the street, looking at textures and models, looking at real world things, and sort of thinking, "Oh, how could I replicate that as a 3D model or as a texture?" And I kind of am in a similar spot with wayfinding, right? Where when I'm out and about, I'm looking at the wayfinding solutions and I'm thinking, how could that work in a video game? How would I apply that in a different situation? What can I take from this? And yeah, that's what I want to do with Catalyst this week, but also other games going forward, is looking at how a player navigates through them, what works well and what doesn't. But yeah, I was just
It's
saying
actually very
this
funny that you
closing
mentioned that.
thoughts. Yeah.
No, that perfectly segues into the thing that I wanted to say, which is to draw a comparison. Because I was just saying the thing of these 3D environments are very familiar to me, and so that's something that I know. Um, but this is because a lot of the design language, a lot of the things that are wayfinding tools that are part of my lived experience, are within that space. Like I said,
Mm.
I've been playing these games since I was young. I know how to navigate a 3D video game space about as well as I know how to navigate a real space. Um, but it's worthy of note that with the comparison that was given earlier, I do not know how to navigate the sea in any capacity. And
Yeah.
that's not just within the example of the was it uh, Polynesian people?
Hmm.
You said,
Yep.
yes, and their ability to recognize features of the tides to understand where land masses could be within a body of water, but also just in general, there are things that other people use. There are things like positions of the stars, the sun and the moon, cloud formations, winds. All of these sorts of things can be used to understand your wayfinding. These
Yeah.
can be used to navigate. And what I will observe within this context is, firstly, I don't know how to do any of that.
Hmm.
And secondly, should someone coming into a video game be expected to learn a new form of navigation first and foremost to be able to comfortably navigate the space?
Mm.
I mean, I'll use another example. Let's say shopping center, shopping mall, right? Have you just finished Mirror's Edge?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was saying where you were going.
All right. Yeah, I guess it is time for closing thoughts then. But Uh, but like I have been in a fair few shopping centers, not like a lot, but a few. Yeah, I probably haven't been in a fair few. Given how many some people go to, I've probably been to like 10 in my whole life, honestly.
Hmm.
But nevertheless, um, I would probably be able to acknowledge, without signage, that there are certain features there that would draw me towards certain things. For example, things like escalators can give you very valuable information,
Oh, big time.
or
Yep.
there are certain doorways and tunnels where it's like, oh, this is where public bathrooms are going to be.
Yep.
And even if you don't have signage indicating this is where public bathrooms are, you would probably be able to pick up this is where public bathrooms are if you've been in a few of these shopping centers. But to a degree, I only know that because I was able to follow signs originally. I
Yeah.
probably would have picked it up eventually, but it would have been an arduous process.
It's the
It would have been,
familiarity. Yeah.
it would have been inaccessible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we also can extrapolate that even further to say that perhaps someone who has spent their entire life on the sea and traveling between fairly like non-modern islands, let's say that this is a person from either a historical environment or someone who simply doesn't really interact with a lot of what we would consider to be like Western contemporary amenities,
Mm.
as it were. We sort of know that if you see the little signs that are of a stick man and stick man with skirt that is meant to that are meant to imply gendered things, that's telling us where toilets are.
Yeah.
If I have spent my entire life without contemporary signage culture, I don't know what those mean.
Mm-hmm.
Those aren't wayfinding tools to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 100%.
And and that's where just a whole nother interesting can of worms is here that sort of leads me to not necessarily a conclusion, but the question about that whole matter with all of
I
these different forms of wayfinding.
I would say a perfect jumping off point if you like that concept and a lot of what we've talked about, you, Zeb, or chat genuinely check out this book. I'm going to make big camera. Wayfinding. It's really good. I really rate this book. I've covered it in notes. What is the subheading? The science and mystery of how humans navigate the world. This
Wonderful.
book is really interesting. It goes into all of that. I mean, it talks about three different cultures and their way of navigating and how modern Western culture has impacted that.
Mhm.
So yeah, highly recommend that. Check your library. Worst case, check online. Worst case, buy it. Start with the library. Um, but yeah, we'll wrap it up there. Um, but yeah, if that's interesting to you, like I said, I'll be on the Chronoboros channel doing more wayfinding stuff, more analyzing games. Um, we will probably end up talking more about it because it's one of my favorite topics. And kind of like if I were to specialize in a career, ideally, I think I'd be like level design wayfinding. Um, but yeah, so we'll be live again next week. You can join the Discord if you want updates on that, updates on YouTube videos going live, and also just a space for discussions around things like this or specifically Arvo. But yeah, I think that's all I've got to plug.
Yep.
Anything else? Happy
Okay.
with that?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. This has been a really great chat.
Brilliant. Awesome. All right. We will see you all next week.